Hey guys, tonight we're heading to the bustling, marble-clad streets of ancient Rome, not to join the Senate, not to command a legion, and certainly not to sip wine in a villa courtyard. No, tonight you are Gaius, the janitor. You're awake, long before the sun rises, long before the roosters even think about crowing. While noblemen dream of conquests and philosophers debate the nature of the universe, you're already trudging through alleyways with a crooked broom and a chipped bucket. And you, my friend, have a very full day of scrubbing, sweeping, and pretending not to hear the scandalous whispers echoing from behind closed doors. By the end of it, your feet will ache, your tunic will smell like 5 different forms of fish, and your hands, well, let's just say they've touched things that even Pliny the Elder wouldn't describe in his natural history. You probably won't survive this job with your dignity intact, but hate's a living dot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from some far-off corner of the empire, post your location and local time down in the comments. I always love seeing how far these sleepy little journeys travel down. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your Gaius. The title on your wax tablet says Custos Mandicia Urbanae, which sounds very noble until you realize it just means urban cleanliness guard. Basically, a janitor. Your shift begins in a patrician villa near the Aventine Hill, where marble pillars frame an open courtyard and grapevines coil lazily up the porticos. Sounds luxurious, right? Well, not when you're the one scraping last night's entertainment off the steps. The master hosted a feast. You weren't invited, obviously, but you could smell it through the wall a dozen courses of oysters. Flamingo tongue, boiled sows, udder, and that infamous fermented fish sauce, garum. It's in everything. It gets everywhere. And once the wine starts flowing, so does everything else. Vomit on the steps, olive pits jammed into mosaics, a fig-stuffed goose leg half-crushed underfoot. One of the guests, possibly a senator, left behind a sandal and a small puddle of regret. You drag your worn broom over the marble, muttering to yourself. The cool air stings your nose. Your breath fogs as you scrub. From the corner of the atrium, a sleepy-eyed slave carrying a silver urn nods at you. Misery loves company, you suppose. Overhead, the first hint of purple creeps across the sky. The roosters still haven't crowed. You work in the half-dark, guided by the flicker of oil lamps. One wobbles dangerously near the wall fresco depicting Diana hunting in the woods. You quickly steady it. Can't afford to burn down the boss's art collection. You'd end up in the arena faster than you could say, not it. This fresco, by the way, isn't just decoration. Roman walls were full of paintings gods, battles, lavish banquets. Some even painted themselves with household gods, hoping their walls might eavesdrop on their prayers. You just want the paint to stop flaking into your dust pile. As you gather up broken crockery, you find a coin. Not gold or silver, mind you, but a grimy bronze is about enough to buy a crust of bread. Still, it's a find. You tuck it in your belt pouch, pretending it's a sign of luck. You'll need it, because someone knocked over the water basin in the hallway again. Clay shards everywhere. And surprise, someone decided that the hallway corner was also a perfectly fine place to, let's say, relieve themselves. They missed the chamber pot entirely. You sigh. You always sigh. Historians still argue whether these early morning tasks were part of a janitor's standard rotation, or if Gaius is just the villa's most disposable servant. Technically, you're not a slave. You're a freedman. You have a legal status, a tiny apartment in the Subura, and the right to own property. But that doesn't mean anyone thanks you for picking up after their pet monkeys, literal monkeys. There's one in the garden that throws stones. You suspect he was a gift from a merchant in Alexandria, and you suspect further that he hates you. You rinse your rag in a bucket of rainwater and squeeze it out, the icy drops running down your arm. You clean everything in concentric loops, just like your supervisor taught you. He once cleaned the temple of Jupiter and claims he scrubbed so hard the marble gleamed like Venus's shoulder. You doubt that, but he does smell strongly of lemon oil and regret. And here's a fun fact. Ancient Roman cleaning methods weren't half bad. They used mixtures of vinegar, ash, sand, and even urine to polish floors and treat stains. Urine contains ammonia. You know, excellent for bleaching, not excellent for your nostrils. But if it works, it works. The downside, the jars for collecting urine were placed right in the streets. Yes, public urinals. Essentially, you've had to empty those before. A task so revolting that you tried pretending you'd broken your wrist once to avoid it. Didn't work. You finish the marble floor just as dawn cracks open across the city's rooftops. Pigeons coo from the tiles. Somewhere, a baker shovels bread into a clay oven. You can smell the crust rising. Your stomach grumbles, but you push on. Your last duty here is polishing the master's bronze helmet. He's not a soldier, of course, but it looks nice in the atrium. Pew, wipe off the fingerprints, buff it to a dull gleam, and leave it on its pedestal. Your work here is done. For now, because next you're headed to another villa. And this one has a fish tank in the dining room and a thing for imported perfumes. You hope you won't have to clean up after another eel wrestling contest. But more on that in the next section. You shuffle out of the first villa, your sandals squishing from who knows what, and trudge down the uneven flagstones toward your next post. This house belongs to a merchanter nouveau rich sort with too much money, too many statues of Apollo, and not nearly enough common sense. He once tried importing a live peacock to impress a dinner guest. It escaped. The guest was not impressed. This merchant is obsessed with luxury. His dining room includes a built-in aquarium, yes, a glass-sided basin right in the middle of the triclinium floor. He has sea urchins, a lazy octopus named Felix, and a pair of exotic fish that may or may not be poison. You've seen one bite a kitchen boy. There was screaming. You're not entirely convinced the boy made it. Today, though, you're not cleaning the fish tank. Today, you're dealing with the aftermath of a particularly raucous banquet. The kind with dancers, a roaming flute player, and at least one spilled amphora of imported Syrian perfume. It smells like crushed violets and burned almonds, and it clings to your nostrils like a debt collector. You step inside and the scent hits you like a patrician's ego. Everything is sticky. The couches are sticky. The floors are sticky. Even the little statues of Bacchus are sticky. You sigh again. That's the second sigh of the day. And it's not even mid-morning. You begin in the dining room, where someone spilled roasted dormice all over the mosaic of Neptune. The little creatures, cooked with honey and poppy seeds, have left a trail of greasy smears. You carefully sweep them up, trying not to think about how expensive they are. One guest probably dropped a week's wages in snacks alone. Then there's the garum, always the garum. A clay amphora of the fermented fish sauce shattered last night, splattering the floor, the walls, and the feet of a marble statue of Minerva. She looks displeased. You try not to make eye contact. Scrubbing this floor is like playing a slippery, fish-scented game of knucklebones. You mix some vinegar into your water-an, old trick passed down from a fellow janitor who once worked in the governor's palace. It cuts the stench, but not your mood. You kneel there elbow deep in greasy sauce, thinking about your life choices. There weren't many, to be fair. You were born in the provinces, enslaved during a local dispute, then manumitted by a baker who needed someone to clean his ovens. From there, it was only upward or sideways. But now you work for people with mosaics of naked gods and secret wine cellars that rival some temples. You scrape a glob of dried figs off the leg of a couch. You wonder if historians will ever care about this stuff. Maybe some dusty academic in the future will study ancient cleaning techniques and marvel at how you tackled congealed snail. Shells with a piece of horsehair and a handful of sand. Or maybe they'll just write you off as labor class and move on to another. Generals' love letters. One thing historians still argue about is whether Roman janitors like you had formal guilds or operated independently. Some say janitorial work was informally structured through patronage networks, meaning if your master liked your work, he'd recommend you to a neighbor. Others argue there were early labor collectives for freedmen doing shared maintenance in multifamily housing. Block. You suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle, mostly involving backhanded compliments and under-the-table bread loaves. Midway through polishing the brass edges of the dining couches, yes, brass couches, just imagine the luxury splinters you. Peace spots something jammed under a cushion. You reach in, half hoping it's a forgotten coin, and pull out a pickled lark, completely intact. Why? No one knows. You wrap it in a rag and toss it in your bucket, muttering about the gods and their cruel sense of humor. Asterisk. From there, it's on to the wall. Frescoes. Romans loved their painted walls, and this merchant is no exception. His showpiece is a scene from the Odyssey, full of waves, monsters, and Odysseus dramatically clutching his head. You gently wipe by the edges of the plaster with a lamb's wool cloth, careful not to smudge the delicate greens and reds. You once accidentally rubbed away the face of a painted Cupid in another house, and the lady of the house nearly set your tunic on fire while you work. Felix the octopus presses himself to the glass of the fish tank, watching you with what feels like judgment. You nod at him. He blinks well. It feels like a blink and retreats into a hollow coral. You've always liked Felix. You once saw him steal a grape from the fruit bowl and hide it behind a rock. Clever little beast, Dot, of course. Not everything about this villa is elegant. The kitchen, for instance, is a war zone. Clay bowls are stacked like the Colosseum, charred meat sticks to iron pans, and someone's burnt a pie so thoroughly it looks fossilized. A junior servant is supposed to handle this, but she's hiding behind the herb shelf, pretending to sort bay leaves. You let her be. Everyone needs a secret corner. The final straw today is a trail of perfume leading to the garden room. Apparently, a drunk guest had tried to impress a dancer by dousing himself in an entire bottle of imported rose oil. He collapsed next to a statue of Venus and relieved himself. Now there's both oil and other things soaking into the polished stone floor. You take a deep breath, then immediately regret it. The cleanup is long, oily, and full of muttering. But when it's done, the room glows with that soft Roman luxury again gold glints. Frescoes shine, and the fish tank bubbles like nothing ever happened. You wipe your hands on your rag and stretch your back. Something cracks. It's time for your midday break. You get 15 minutes and a handful of olives. If you're lucky, the vendor by the fountain still has warm barley cakes. If not, it's back to the villa with a stomach full of garum fumes. The sun is climbing higher. Rome is waking up fully. Now markets buzzing, sandals slapping stone, and somewhere, inevitably, someone shouting about stolen turnips. You brush the last fig seeds off your tunic and step out into the heat. And next, you're headed to the bathhouse. The latrines await. May the gods pity you. You've barely had time to swallow your last olive before your feet carry you to the next assignment, the neighborhood therme. One of the public bathhouses used by everyone from senators to sandal salesmen. A Roman bathhouse is more than just a place to get clean. It's a hub of gossip, gambling, low-stakes politics, and high-stakes bacteria. And for you, Gaius the janitor, it's a battlefield of bodily fluids and cursed plumbing. The sun is higher now, and the front colonnade of the bathhouse is already bustling. There's a vendor outside selling combs made of bone and a teenager trying to rent out threadbare towels to unsuspecting foreigners. You nod to them, fellow survivors of Rome's strange economy. Then you head inside, past the changing rooms, past the apodiatrium, where clients shove their sandals into cubbies, guarded by boys with sharp eyes and even sharper tongues. And then the latrines. You've seen things no man should see. The public toilets in Rome are notorious. Long marble benches with keyhole-shaped holes. No privacy, and a single shared sponginistic tersorium dipped in vinegar between uses. You approach with your tools, a rag that smells like it has a grudge against humanity, a chipped bronze scraper, and a bucket half full of diluted ash water. The sponge is already sitting there, abandoned in its jar, like some sad little sea creature. One bench has overflowed again. Someone missed quite spectacularly, and someone else left behind a chicken foot howl. Why? These are not questions you ask. You just sigh. That's number 3 today. Cleaning these latrines requires both patience and a strong stomach. You start with the obvious mess, using sand to soak up the worst of it. Then your scraper to remove anything that's decided to bond chemically with the marble. All the while, voices echo off the tiled wall's gruff laughter. The slap of sandals, the occasional squeal as someone enters the frigidarium without mentally preparing for the cold. There's an old superstition among janitors that bathhouse spirits dwell near the drains. Some say they're the souls of those who died from slipping on soap. Others think they're just angry plumbing gods. You've never seen one, but you swear the shadows flicker weirdly in here, especially by the second stall on the left. You avoid that one. Despite what modern imaginations might conjure, Roman sanitation wasn't completely negligent. These latrines often had running water beneath the benches to help wash away waste. Though the smell still lingers like bad poetry, the aqueducts, those engineering marvels, helped flush the worst of it, but only when they weren't clogged with leaves. Frogs, or, once, a lost sandal from a child who now probably believes the underworld swallowed it. Historians still argue whether janitors like you were part of a formal staff maintained by the municipal government, or if bathhouse. Cleaning rotated among private contractors, be the way. You know one thing. The man who designed these latrines never had to clean them. Once the worst is scrubbed and rinsed, you move to the caldarium, the hot bathroom. Steam hangs in the air like a damp curtain. The marble is slippery underfoot, and the air smells like eucalyptus, sweat, and boiled feet. A bather slips on the far end and curses in Greek. You pretend not to hear. You mop up water pooled under the benches and recenter a toppled statue of Hercules. The statue's missing a thumb. You know this because it once fell on your foot, and you cursed Hercules for a solid 5 minutes before remembering he probably wouldn't appreciate that dot at the far end. 2 older men argue about the Senate. Something about grain tariffs and price of lamp oil. You catch fragments as you wipe down a mosaic of Neptune riding dolphins. It's very detailed. You wonder if Neptune would help you clean this place if you asked nicely. Then comes the mystery puddle. It's in the hallway between the hot and cold rooms. No one claims it. No one knows what it is. You poke it with your mop. It hisses slightly. You decide not to ask further questions, and instead cover it with sand and a small ceramic warning tile that says, "Slippery." You drew that yourself. You're oddly proud of it. While passing through the tepidarium, the warm room, you find a pile of clothes in the corner. Someone forgot them, or, more likely, left in a hurry after realizing their toga had been taken. Togas all look the same, after all. You tuck the bundle aside, drop it off at lost property, which is basically just a basket behind the furnace, overseen by a man named Flavius, who definitely naps more than he watches. Speaking of the furnace, it's time to check the hypocaust venster, hollow spaces under the floor where hot air circulates to heat the rooms. You crouch near, be great and listen. The fire slaves down below are at work, shoveling wood, grumbling, and probably cursing whoever invented the concept of warm floors. One of them passes you a broken tile through the vent. You give him a thumbs up. That's your entire conversation for the week. As you leave the main hall, you notice someone has drawn something crude in the condensation on the wall. You wipe it off without looking too closely. You don't get paid enough to interpret bathhouse graffiti, though, truth be told, it can be oddly poetic. Last week, someone wrote, "Life is short, but wine is forever," next to a drawing of a cat riding a chariot. You let that one stay. You pass a bather, drying himself with what looks like a theater curtain. You don't ask. Some questions are best left unanswered. By now, your tunic is damp, your back aches, and you're fairly certain your hair smells like steam-cooked onions. You exit the bathhouse into a patch of sunlight, letting the warmth chase the damp from by your sleeves. You survived. Barely you count this as a win. But your work's far from over, because the librarian at the Basilica, Julia, needs help dusting scrolls, and possibly rewriting one. And no one tells you Latin grammar is this painful dot. By now, you're beginning to dry out, though only on the outside. Inside, you're still mostly a soup of sweat, steam, and crushed pride. Your sandals squelch faintly as you cross the forum, weaving through chatter and the clink of tools and marble. You pass a man selling boiled chickpeas from a cart that smells like burnt cumin and ambition, and somewhere behind you a dog is barking at a statue. You don't look back. You've learned never to look back. Your next destination looms. Ahead, the Grand Basilica Julia. It stretches along the edge of the forum like a stone colossus. Columns bright under the midday sun, banners flapping lazily in the heat. The Senate meets here sometimes, but you're not here for politics. You're here for scrolls. Inside, the air is dry and cool, like stepping into a very orderly tomb. Rows of scroll niches line the walls, parchments and papyri stuffed into clay pots, wooden boxes, and occasionally an empty amphora when someone gets lazy. Your task today: dust, clean, and repair damage in the tiny archive room used by one of Rome's more forgettable magistrates. He's the kind of man who writes commentary on commentary. His scrolls are labeled things like observations on the footnotes of Varro, Volume 7, and the tax implications of beekeeping in Hispania. Riveting stuff. Truly, you kneel beside the first shelf and blow lightly on a bundle of scrolls. A puff of ancient dust explodes in your face, and you immediately regret existing. You cough, sneeze, then sneeze again, which knocks a tiny ink pot off the desk. It rolls, hits your sandal, and miraculously doesn't spill. The gods are clearly distracted this morning. You begin your work with a rag and a fine-tipped brush. The scrolls must be handled gently, like baby snakes or angry philosophers. Some of the older ones crackle as you unwind them. A few are glued shut with what smells suspiciously like olive paste. You separate those carefully once. You tore a speech by Cicero in half. You blamed it on a mouse. No one questioned you by some excellent scapegoats. As you clean, your eyes flick across the texts. Latin in looping black ink, sometimes fading to brown. Marginalia in Greek. The occasional Doodle One scroll has a tiny figure of Mercury chasing a chicken drawn in the margin. You pause to admire the artistry. The chicken looks terrified. One scroll has partially molded. You don't tell anyone. Toe. You just scrape away the worst of it and hope no one's planning to reread on the administrative duties of third-rank officials in Cisalpine Gaul. Honestly, it might be an improvement. Historians still argue whether Roman archives like these were considered public repositories or the private collections of elite officials. Evidence points both ways. You suspect it depended on who was asking and how many coins were in their purse. There's also debate over how literate janitors and other support staff really were. You can read, though not quickly, and you've picked up a fair amount of bureaucratic Latin, enough to know when a document is about taxes, and enough to fake ignorance when it's about something worse. The archivist wanders in while you're re-rolling a scroll and nearly causes you to drop it. He's carrying a plate of dates and looks like someone who's never dusted anything except a fig. He points to a pile of parchment and says, "That one needs to be recopied." You squint at the stack. It's a half-destroyed list of names, by and grain measurement. Half of it smudged, the other half eaten by time or beetles. You nod and sit at the low wooden desk. It's copying time. You dip a reed pen into a pot of ink and begin slowly transcribing in neat, blocky letters. Marcus Fabius, 3 bushels. Gaius Flaccus, 5 sacks of spelt. It goes on. Somewhere in the middle, you write your own name, Jess, once in tiny letters in the margin of a blank page. Not because you're vain, just so that someday someone might know you existed. It's not glamorous work, but it's strangely meditative. The scratch of pen on parchment, the occasional rustle of paper, a pigeon cooing in the rafters above. For once, nothing smells like fermented fish or soap lather. It almost feels like peace. Then, of course, the ink spills. You bump the pot with your elbow, and a great blot spreads across your work like Pompey's last moment. You lunge with your ragged too late, for names lost to history. You sigh and begin again. It's that kind of day, Dot. You take a break to dust the floor, tiles on it, mosaic patterns in green and blue, chipped in places, but still beautiful. You once found a coin wedged between 2 tiles. You kept it. You bought goat cheese with it. That was a good day. One of the fringe jobs no one talks about is managing the vermin in buildings like this. Mice love scrolls. They chew the corners like nervous librarians. You've set traps, harmless ones, just to catch and release. But this basilica has a rat, a big one. You've seen it. It watches you from the far end of the hall, sitting upright like a tiny senator. You've named him Octavius. You nod when you pass. He nods back. Probably the day drags parchment by parchment. You patch a torn map with fresh papyrus. You rewrap 2 scrolls in linen and tie them with twine. You repair a cracked clay scroll jar using sticky pitch and a prayer. It leaks anyway. Finally, just as your eyes begin to blur and your fingers cramp, the magistrate strolls in. He inspects your work briefly, nods, and says something like, "Clean enough," before wandering off. That's the Roman equivalent of a gold medal. You gather your tools, stretch your back, and blink at the daylight outside. You've earned a rest, a sip of wine, maybe half a fig, if they're cheap today. But rest is a luxury, and janitors rarely get more than a moment of it. Because now it's time to visit the temple precinct. There's a fountain clogged with wax offerings, a cracked statue base, and according to rumor, stolen sandals stuck in a sacred flame. And guess whose job that is? So, off you trudge again. Sandals scraping against the cobbled road, back bent ever so slightly from carrying a satchel filled with rags, wax scrapers, a bit of olive oil, and whatever is left of your will to live. You follow the flow of foot traffic toward the sacred heart of the city, the temple precincts, that holy cluster of towering columns and solemn gods, where incense burns, bells chime softly, and sacrifices are made in smells you've learned. Tell not to investigate too closely. You're not a priest, of course. You wouldn't dare go near the altar unless absolutely ordered. But you, Gaius, the humble janitor, are still entrusted with one of the most delicate tasks in Roman public life, cleaning the offerings and keeping the gods' front porches spotless. Because, apparently, Jupiter's mood can be soured by pigeon droppings. Today, the temple of Venus Genetrix is on your list. You've been here before. The goddess stands in marble perfection at the center, flanked by carved roses and wide-eyed doves. You always feel like she's judging you, or laughing, maybe both. Someone has left a wreath of garlic bulbs at her feet. For love, presumably. You can't tell if it's a romantic gesture or an aggressive prank. There's a lot to tidy up. The priests are busy inside preparing a ceremony, but out here it's chaos. Wax figurines have melted in the sun and fused into one grotesque blob. Near the base of the steps, you kneel beside it with your bronze scraper, muttering apologies to whatever poor soul's fertility charm is now permanently stuck to someone else's prayer for a better harvest. You also find a broken amphora filled with what was once wine, now a sticky sludge swarming with bees. The amphora, oddly, is stuffed with strips of linen, a fringe cult, maybe. You clean around it with a respectful nod and dump what's left into the disposal urn behind the colonnade. There's a growing argument among historians about whether Some of these odd rituals were grassroots superstitions or sanctioned fringe traditions. You've seen enough offerings involving eggs, fish bones, and toenail clippings to know that no one really knows. Further along the courtyard is the famous communal fountain, the one said to have sprung from a crack in the earth after a lightning strike. Whether or not that's true, the thing is absolutely full of coins, wax charms, flower petals, and, bafflingly, a pair of children's shoes. One sandal is wedged in the grate, probably the same one you heard about earlier. You roll up your tunic side and wade in carefully. The water's cold and smells faintly of iron. Not terrible, but not great. You retrieve the sandal with a long stick you've used for such tasks before. Then, one by one, you scoop out the wax charms with a strainer made from old bronze mesh. A nearby priest gives you a disapproving look, but says nothing. You suspect it's not about your cleaning, more about your existence. You flash him your best janitor grin. He looks away. You dry your hands on a rag already stiff from previous disasters and begin cleaning the statue bases with olive oil. Yes, really, olive oil works wonders on marble, makes it shine. You've been told not to use too much, though. One time, a statue of Minerva became so slippery it nearly crushed a visiting dignitary from Corinth. Historians don't agree on how common statue accidents were, but you believe every one of them as you polish the pedestal of the temple's minor deity. You notice someone has carved a message into the side. Julia loves Marcus, even when he smells like fish. You chuckle. That's surprisingly sweet for Roman graffiti. You leave it. Venus might approve. The mid-afternoon sun has now turned the temple steps into heat traps. You mop sweat from your brow, finish scrubbing the last by of the bird droppings from the handrail, and prepare to leave. But a novice priest calls out to you. There's something stuck under the altar. Could be a cat, or worse. You pause. Anything described vaguely as worse usually ends badly. You follow him through a shadowed corridor and into the inner sanctum, not too close to the sacred fire, of course. You crouch, peer under the base of the altar, and yup, it's a cat, or what's left of its meal. You retrieve the remains with a practiced, delicate motion, using a long scoop and your least favorite rag. The novice gags. You don't. You've built up a tolerance. You clean the area quickly and quietly. Replace a burnt-out oil lamp with a fresh one, and nod respectfully to the goddess as you back away on your way out. You pass a musician tuning his lyre, preparing for the evening's procession. You catch a few notes soft, lilting, somehow sad. For a moment, you pause and breathe in the incense-heavy air. Let your pulse slow. You allow yourself to believe, just briefly, that your work matters, that a clean statue base makes the gods smile, that catching a runaway sandal before it burns in a sacred fire might mean fewer earthquakes this year. One last stop before the day's final stretch. A side shrine to Mercury, patron of travelers, thieves, and janitors. Yes, really. Some scholars argue Mercury was the unofficial god of messengers and maintenance folk. Others say janitors were beneath divine notice. You disagree. You always leave an extra crumb or coin for Mercury, just in case. You touch the edge of his altar with 2 fingers, whisper a quiet thanks, and drop a small chip of marble into the offering bowl. Then you turn, shoulders sore, hair frizzed, and tunic now bearing the unmistakable smell of divine wax and wet cat. But no rest for Gaius, not yet, because someone broke a sewer cover near the Subura, and there's been bubbling. And guess whose name is at the top of that list? You make your way toward the Subura with a slow, reluctant rhythm, one that echoes the thud of your own weary heart. If Rome is a living body, the Subura is the guts, crowded, tangled, full of heat and life and smells that defy reason. The streets narrow, twisting like intestines, winding between tenement buildings that lean in close, whispering damp secrets to each other across the alleys. Pew, duck under laundry lines, sidestep a chicken, and avoid eye contact with a man who is probably urinating into a barrel that doesn't belong to him. The Subura has always been loud, dirty, and impossibly alive. It's where bakers share walls with poets, gladiators rent rooms from retired scribes, and pickpockets raise their children on rooftops. For you, Gaius, it's both familiar and slightly terrifying, because today's task involves a sewer cap, and sewer caps in this part of town never lead to good things. You arrive at the site, marked by a crude chalk symbol on the wall, a triangle with 3 dots, a code left by another janitor. Caution, smells, sludge, and possible snakes. You sigh. You've seen worse. Kneeling beside the round stone cover, you sniff why you do this. Even you don't know and confirm that yes, something is not right. The stone is warm. It shouldn't be. There's also a faint bubbling sound, like a soup you forgot about 2 hours ago. The Romans were masters of aqueducts and sewers cloaca maxima. The Grand Sewer of Rome is still considered an engineering marvel, but even the best systems clog, crack, and complain. You wedge your iron lever under the cap and lift. A waft of sulfur and decay rolls out like a particularly angry ghost. You lean back and let the wave pass. It's definitely worse than the last time. Much worse. You're not expected to fix the sewer itself. Gods forbid. Your job is simply to report back and clean the surface spill. But first, you peer down, just to make sure there isn't a creature nesting down there. Once, a sewer crocodile showed up near the market district. Historians still argue whether crocodiles were truly found in Roman sewers, or if that was just another tall tale exaggerated by wine and boredom. But you've seen scratches in the stonework. You believe. This time, though, it's just sludge-thick, dark, and swirling ever so slightly, as if waiting for you to drop something valuable in. You lower your ragtide cleaning stick and start fishing out surface gunk, bits of cloth, broken tiles, and something that might have once been a turnip. You don't ask. You never ask. As you work, a few neighborhood kids gather around to watch. One of them dares the others to spit into the hole. Another tries to steal your pouch. You swat him gently on the head with your cleaning rod. He laughs and runs. It's a game. You pour a small pot of lye solution around the edge of the opening, watching the reaction bubble up in little angry clouds. The smell intensifies, and your eyes water. You hum a tune through gritted teeth, a sad ballad about a janitor who fell into a well and was never heard from again. You made it up yesterday. It's disturbingly catchy. Eventually, the worst of the mess is cleared. You drag the sewer cap back into place and wedge it with a brick. There's a clattering behind you. A woman has knocked over a basket of leeks while swatting at her son, who's covered in soot. You help her gather them. She thanks you with a crooked smile and offers a small pear. It's soft but edible. You eat it in 3 bites. You stop by a communal well to rinse your hands. The cool water refreshes you, though it doesn't quite erase the smell. You splash some on your face and stare at your reflection. Hair wild, eyes tired. Smudge on your cheek you no longer care enough to wipe off. You look like Rome itself, grimy, sunburnt, and somehow still standing. Just before you leave the Sabura, you're flagged down by a shopkeeper. The paint has peeled off her stall sign again. She doesn't ask for help outright, but she looks at you the way statues look at sacrifices. You grab your tin of red pigment, slap a fresh coat on with a horsehair brush, and smile when she pats your arm in gratitude. She offers bread, but you decline. You've already had a pair. You're practically a senator. Some historians speculate that Roman janitors like you often served as neighborhood handymen, fixers of small problems, patches of broken walls, even informal mail carriers. You don't disagree. You've delivered more letters than some scribes and patched more roofs than any official builder. You've even babysat goats. Once the sun begins to lower over the Subura's rooftops, casting long golden shadows. You know the day's not over yet, but you give yourself a brief moment to lean against a wall and breathe. A cat brushes past your leg. You don't know where it came from. You don't ask tomorrow. Someone else will break a vase, lose a sandal, vomit on a temple step, or drop a love letter into a gutter. Bend, Gaius, the janitor of Rome, will be there with a rag, a bucket, and a slow, patient sigh. But not just yet. Now, it's time to head to the arena. You've heard the vomitorium steps are sticky again. And worse, someone smeared honey on a pillar for reasons you dare not imagine. You make your way toward the amphitheater, the familiar weight of your tools knocking gently against your hip. The Colosseum looms in the distance, a monstrous ring of stone and shadows. Even from here, you can hear the muffled echo of the crowd cheers, laughter, the occasional shriek. You're not here for the show. You're here for the aftermath. The closer you get, the more the smell shifts from street bread and dust to blood, sweat, and roasted peanuts. You pause under a colonnade and take a breath. There's always something about the arena that makes your shoulders tense. Maybe it's the noise, or maybe it's the fact that no one ever cleans as thoroughly as they claim. Inside, the place is already beginning to empty. Gladiators have returned to their quarters. Spectators file out in chatty groups, still debating who should have won. One nobleman is arguing with a vendor about the price of a stuffed dormouse. You slip past them unnoticed. You always do. A guard waves you in. Janitorius, he grunts. That's not really your name, but they've stopped learning it. You nod back and head straight for the side corridor where the honey incident happened. And there it is. One of the columns, a tall slab of marble near the second vomitorium, is streaked with thick golden syrup. It glistens under the torches, already attracting flies the size of walnuts. You kneel beside it and touch the edge. Sticky, yes. Sweet, yes. Completely unnecessary, also yes. Someone clearly smeared it there on purpose. Maybe as a prank, maybe as an offering, or maybe someone just had very bad aim. Historians still debate whether vomitoria were actually used, for vomiting, as popular legend claims, merely passageways for large crowds. You have yet to see someone throw up directly into the architecture, but you've seen what people can do to a stone bench after too much wine and a midday execution. So, you're not ruling anything out. You scrape the honey away with slow, firm strokes. The sweetness makes your stomach rumble, but the buzzing flies kill the appetite quickly. Around you, the arena creaks and hums with quiet. An old merchant begins sweeping up discarded food wrappers. A boy collects bronze coins lost beneath benches. Everyone's cleaning something. It's the invisible side of Rowan, the post-spectacle repair crew. Farther down the corridor, there's a patch of dried something. You crouch and sniff. Not blood, not wine, not animal fat. Possibly fermented plum juice. Mute it up anyway. Whatever it is, it's now gone. You finish the last of the sticky streaks and rub olive oil on the marble to mask the residue. As you stand, you hear footsteps behind you. A young woman in a torn tunic appears, clutching a broom. She must be new. She gives you a nervous nod. You nod back. There's no secret janitor handshake, only shared trauma. She points toward a stairwell and whispers, "There's something on the wall." You don't ask what, you just follow. Sure enough, carved into the stone is a crude drawing of a gladiator, wearing a fish for a helmet and holding a sausage like a sword. Next to it, Valerius fights like a tired mule. You laugh out loud. The young woman stifles a smile. You hand her a small brush and say, "Light strokes. Leave the outline, it's good craftsmanship." She giggles. Graffiti in Rome is a constant. Some historians suggest it was a form of mass communication, especially among lower classes who couldn't afford scrolls. Others believe it was just bored people with sharp objects and strong opinions. Either way, you see it everywhere. You've even found political rants on urinal walls. Surprisingly well argued. After a brief detour to sweep up some scattered amphora shards and an unexplainably moldy fig tart, you move toward the animal staging area. You were warned that a bear didn't make it out, as in it died, not it's still wandering the tunnels. You check twice anyway. No bear, just a puddle where it once was. You light a small oil lamp and kneel beside the stain. The smell hits you immediately. Tragic mix of fur, dung, and despair. You mutter under your breath and get to work with sawdust and a rag dipped in rosemary vinegar. It doesn't remove the smell exactly, but it replaces it with something slightly less offensive. You'll take it. Midway through scrubbing, you spot something shiny under the straw. A ring, bronze, probably cheap, but someone's token. No doubt. You pocket it gently. Maybe you'll return it. Maybe it'll end up in your collection of lost things at Homan. Old wooden box filled with buckles, hairpins, wax seals, and mysteries. Just as you're finishing, a loud voice calls. From above, there's a spill near the Emperor's box. Of course there is. You make your way up the winding stone stairs, stepping aside for two exhausted flute players. They reek of sweat and cheap perfumes. You reach the upper tier and find the spill. A jug of garam fermented fish, been knocked over, soaking into the carpets. Of all things, garam. It's like anchovy perfume mixed with a slap to the nose. You kneel again. Every muscle protests. You dip your rag into a bucket of vinegar and start scrubbing with mechanical precision. Around you, marble pillars glow in torchlight. You catch a glimpse of the Emperor's seat, now empty, littered with olive pits and crushed fig leaves. No one sees you here, but you see everything. As you finish blotting the last stain, a breeze passes through the upper tier, lifting the scent of vinegar and salt into the air. You close your eyes briefly and let it carry some of your fatigue away. Tomorrow, the crowds will return. New games, new messes, new stains. But for now, the arena rests. And so do you at least, until someone finds another surprise under the stairs. You gather your tools, shoulder your bag, and descend into the torchlit corridors once again. One more site to visit before nightfall. The public baths, because someone dropped a mosaic tile, and you're the only one who knows how to fix it without flooding the atrium dome. You arrive at the public baths just as the last rays of sunlight stretch lazily across the tiled atrium, filtering through the high arched windows like fingers of sleepy gold. The baths of Titus. This one's smaller than the Imperial Thermae, but still grand by any modern standard. You duck past a marble statue of Apollo that has unfortunately lost its nose, greet the attendant with a nod, and step onto the cool mosaic floor. A soft, familiar humidity wraps around you. The scent here is different. A mix of damp stone, floral oils, old sandals, and faint mildew. Steam rolls lazily from the caldarium to your left. To your right, the tepidarium's water laps gently, like the breath of a giant slumbering beast. The head attendant waves you over to the frigidarium, coldest room in the place, both in temperature and temperament. Tile popped loose, he says with a grunt, already halfway through oiling his elbows. You follow his gesture, then spot it near the plunge pool. A single tessera, little square of blue glass, has worked its way loose, like a tooth wobbling, before it falls. Bath mosaics were painstakingly laid by artisans, each tile hand-cut and set into wet mortars. Some were simple patterns, others, like this one, depicted intricate marine scenes, dolphins, sea nymphs, and the occasional, anatomically optimistic Triton. Your job is simple. Reset the tile before someone's soft patrician foot discovers it and starts yelling about lawsuits. You kneel, pulling your tool satchel closer. As you clean around the empty socket, you think about how much of your life be spent on your knees, not in prayer, not in begging, just always reaching for something that fell, broke, or leaked. Your knees ache like you're 50. You're 27. You mix a little mortar lime sand, crushed brick and tamp it gently into place. You realign the tessera, press it flat, and wipe away the excess with a rag that was once a fine linen tunic, probably confiscated during laundry day. You hum softly a half-remembered tune from your childhood, maybe about goats, maybe about soup. A splash echoes from the other end of the pool. Someone's slipped. You glance up and see a young man flailing in the shallow end face, twisted in panic. He's not drowning, just dramatic. Two older bathers help him up, shaking their heads. Too much wine, one mutters. The young man vomits neatly into a potted fern. You sigh and reach into your bag. Vinegar again. Always vinegar. You mop the mess with practiced efficiency. A few bathers watch you with a mix of pity and relief, as if silently grateful that they aren't the ones holding the rag. One of them, an elderly senator with a beard like a broom, hands you a small coin. For your trouble, he says. U-N-O-D. It's a sestertius. Barely enough for lunch, but the gesture counts. Historians still debate whether Roman janitors were formally employed by the state or informally hired by venue managers. You've heard both arguments. What you do know is that your pay arrives irregularly. Your uniform is self-funded, and your official title is something no one can pronounce. Once the frigidarium is clean, you head to the hypercost access corridor, cramped crawl space under the floors where hot air from furnaces is channeled to heat the baths above. It's dangerously hot and not technically your job, but you promised to check on a rattle someone heard yesterday. Probably a mouse, the stoker said, or a god. You lower yourself into the corridor. The stone walls close in around. Bew. The air is thick like breathing through warm bread. You crawl carefully, torch in one hand, brush in the other. A loose clay pipe clinks gently against its housing with every gust of heat. That's your rattle. You press it back into place. With a wedge of scorched wood, a minor fix, but it could have meant trouble. You've seen what happens when these things go ignored and higher rooms fogged with soot, or worse, accidental fires. Rome doesn't need another fire dot. As you crawl back out, your tunic catches on a nail and rips. Of course, you patch it with a safety pin made from twisted bronze wire. Your aunt used to call you Gaius, the fixer. It was meant kindly, mostly. Back upstairs, the baths are empty. The oiling station is slick with discarded towels, and the changing room smells like a dozen old men argued about politics in a hot cupboard. You mop quickly, efficiently, careful not to move the sandals lined neatly by the doorway. Romans take their sandals very seriously. A boy runs in barefoot and breathless. Someone dropped a necklace in the caldarium. He shouts. You groan softly, but follow. The caldarium is heavy with steam. Visibility is low. You wade into the warm water nid, feeling the floor with your toes. Something brushes past your ankle, free. Probably a bath sponge. Probably you eventually find the necklacer string of glass beads and one chipped amber pendant tangled around the foot of a statue. You lift it like it's treasure. The woman who lost it claps with joy and kisses your cheek. You smile, but inside you're already calculating how long it'll take to dry your tunic, as you finish your final wipe down of the benches. The attendant claps you on the back. Clean as Apollo's teeth, he says. You're not sure what that means, but it sounds positive. You head back out into the evening air, tired and sore and vaguely damp. The sky is lavender now, and the city glows with torchlight. Your shadow stretches across the cobblestones like it's trying to lie down without you. You still have one stop left, the bakery near the forum. The owner says his flour bins are attracting beetles. You're not an exterminator, but you do know how to rig a vinegar trap using old wine jars and crushed laurel leaves. Janitor magic dot. So you adjust your tool belt, roll your shoulders, and start walking. The gods didn't give you a temple, but they gave you a mop. You arrive at the bakery just as the last of the day's bread is being pulled from the clay oven. The air outside thick with the scent of warm crust and roasted sesame. It's almost unfair your stomach growls like a trapped lion. You haven't eaten since a cold fig at dawn, and even that was shared with a stray cat that stared you down until guilt got the better of you. The baker, Marcus, waves you in with a flour-dusted hand. Back room, he says. They're dancing. Again. You nod, already guessing he doesn't mean customers. You step past baskets of still steaming loaves and around. A small boy attempting to balance a wheel of cheese on his head. Inside the back room, the scent changes from sweet wheat and cinnamon to something a little more lively. You kneel by the storage bins and lift the lid. There they are, beetles, again, tiny, dark, and wriggling with unapologetic joy. They've turned the flour into their own private coliseum, and no one's winning. You frown. You'd cleaned this bin just 3 days ago, covered the gaps with waxed linen, sprinkled the laurel, even sang a protective chant you have remembered from your grandmother. Still, they came back. Flower bugs, Rome's smallest insurgents. You mutter something, not quite a curse, but not exactly a compliment, and begin your work. First, you scoop out the infested layer, careful not to stir the whole thing. Then you mix your special deterrent olive oil, vinegar, laurel powder, and crushed bay leaves. You smear it around the rim of the bin like war paint. It smells like salad dressing. The bugs hate it, probably. Historians still debate whether Roman janitors like you were also expected to serve as pest control. Some argue that it was a separate job entirely. The Verminarius, a man armed with traps and poisons and apparently a high tolerance for squeaking. Others suggest any janitor worth their salt learned to improvise. You've been improvising since your first day on the job as you work. Marcus brings you a crusty heel of bread payment, appreciation, or perhaps a peace offering. You accept it with a nod and chew thoughtfully. It's dry. It tastes like victory. Once the beetle situation is under control, Marcus asks if you can help with a small problem in the cellar. Of course he does. Something's leaking, he says, or hissing, or both. You descend a rickety ladder into the underbakery, dark, damp, and filled with sacks of chickpeas and the unmistakable smell of mold. Your torch flickers against the curved walls, and you listen carefully. There it is. A soft hiss, rhythmic and patient, like a snake in meditation. You trace the sound to an old wine amphora, half buried in salt. A hairline crack runs down its side, leaking a thin stream of sour liquid onto the floor. You press your palm against it gently, warm. You reach into your bag and produce a patch of waxed linen, left over from a bathhouse repair. You press it into place and seal the edges with softened beeswax from your emergency candle stub. Snake defeated, amphora saved, floor mostly dry. You are a god of minor repairs. On your way back up, you knock your elbow on a hanging ham and nearly drop your torch. You consider shouting at the ham, but decide against it. It's not the ham's fault. Back in the street, Rome is settling into night. The alleyways glow with torchlight. The shadows lengthen, and laughter spills from nearby tavernas. A passing senator trips on his own toga, and a dog runs off with someone's sandal. You start your walk home. Your apartment is smaller. Room over a tannery that smells of boiled leather and regret, but it's yours. As you walk, you pass the temple of Castor and Pollux, now closed for the night. You glance up at the statues on the pediment. You nod at them. They don't nod back. The forum is quieter now. Street vendors pack up their stalls. One is muttering about cabbage prices. Another tries to give you a fish. You politely decline. You're not adding fish wrangler to your list tonight. You spot a group of scribes from the tax office walking, home ink-stained fingers waving lazily. One calls out, Gaius, still fixing the empire one mop at a time. You smirk, just trying to keep the bugs from running for Senate. They laugh. You keep walking. Historians still argue whether ordinary workers like you influenced Rome's rhythm in unseen ways. Whether the quiet laborers, the sweepers, the scrapers, the beetle banishers kept the machine oiled, while the poets and generals took the credit. You don't care. You're not in it for the marble statues. At a fountain, you pause to wash your hands. The water is cool, refreshing. Your reflection wobbles in the surface-tired eyes, smudged cheeks, a tunic that's been through too much. But there's dignity there too. You made it through another day. No fires, no riots, only 3 near vomits and 1 beetle uprising. Not bad. As you walk the last stretch home, you pass a child chalking a hopscotch board onto the pavement. She waves at you. You wave back. She shouts, "Are you the man who cleaned up the honey?" At the Colosseum, you nod. She gasps like you're a legend. You're not. You're a janitor. But sometimes that's enough. At your door, you fumble with your Kia-bent piece of bronze. That only works if you whisper to it first. The door creaks open. Inside, your wooden stool, your box of lost things, a tired cot, and a half-eaten pear. Home, you drop your bag by the stool and sit. Not collapse, just sit. It's a sacred act. Your knees thank you with a long, crackly sigh. Outside, Rome purrs softly stone, and wind and distant laughter. You listen, eyes half closed. Tomorrow will bring more leaks, more stains, more graffiti, involving farm animals. But for now, you rest. You earned it. And somewhere, under a bakery floor, a beetle scuttles away from your vinegar trap, vowing revenge. You're jolted awake at dawn by a shriek, something between a human scream and a goat's disapproval. For a fleeting moment, you wonder if the gods are finally staging an intervention. But no, it's your neighbor, Flavia, the flower vendor, who has once again discovered that pigeons have mistaken her balcony garden for a communal latrine. You lie still for a moment, letting your eyes adjust to the soft grey light filtering through the shutters. Then you groan. Your knees complain. Your shoulders sound like dry wood snapping. You sit up and mutter, Ave aches. Another Roman morning. There's no time to dawdle. The schedule is packed, and janitors don't get the luxury of sleeping in not even. If they're on speaking terms with the bakery beetles, you splash your face with cold water from a cracked clay jug, which you really should repair. Barney, how you fix everything except your own things. You eat half a pomegranate and chew a leftover bit of flatbread that could legally be classified as a weapon. Then you roll up your tool satchel, adjust your belt, and descend into the city. First, stop the Temple of Vesta. Sacred fires don't maintain themselves. And where there's fire, there's ash, and where there's ash, there's Gaius. You arrive just as one of the Vestal virgins opens the gate, yawning and muttering about dreams involving horses that spoke in riddles. You nod sympathetically, then head straight to the fire chamber. The room is warm, womb-like, flickering with orange light. You can feel the air shiver with the ancient heat of generations. The flame never dies at least. That's the plan. But embers build up, smoke stains the marble, and sometimes small animals sneak in seeking warmth. You once pulled a snake from behind the altar. The priestesses screamed. The snake screamed. You screamed. It was a bonding experience. Today, the ash has built up to the point where it's gently overflowing the fire basin, like a cake gone wrong. You kneel and begin your gentle scooping wooden tools only, because metal might anger the goddess. You work carefully, reverently, because this is one of those tasks where a mistake isn't just inconvenient, it's possibly sacrilegious. Historians still argue whether janitors like you were considered sacred servants while working at religious sites. Some claim you were blessed by association. Others insist you were invisible help. You just try not to sneeze into the eternal flame. You pause for a moment and admire your work freshly cleared ash. the fire dancing cleanly. One of the priestesses offers you a fig, a peace offering, perhaps. You take it, thank her, and move on. Your next assignment is decidedly less sacred. The public urinals near the forum, Romans called them. Foricastone benches with suspiciously shaped holes, and a constant stream of gossip echoing off their walls. Pew. Arrive with your bucket of vinegar and your dignity only mildly dented. You nod to the man sitting near the entrance, charging a fee for accessees, one of those minor officials with a title that sounds grand, but mostly involves making change. Busy morning, you ask. He shrugs. 3 senators, a gladiator, and a goat. You nod. A typical Tuesday. You sweep, scrub, and freshen the stone floors, making sure the spongionistic buckets are refilled. You wonder, not for the first time, who came up with that brilliant idea. It's practical, if slightly horrifying. A man walks in, dressed in a toga far too fine for the location, and loudly complains about the lack of marble seating. You don't answer. You just quietly adjust a loose tile so it won't trip someone. Important silence is your favorite rebuttal. Later, as you rinse out your rag in the fountain nearby, a child runs up and points at your belt. "Are you a soldier?" he asks. You chuckle. Worse. You say, "I'm a janitor." The child blinks. "Is that like a gladiator?" You consider. "In a way, except my enemies are faster and made of questionable substances." He seems satisfied with this answer and runs off, cape flapping. You finish your rinse, wring out the cloth, and sigh. Your next stop is the theater of Pompey Grand, echoing, always smelling faintly of old olives and fresh arguments. You're there to clean the backstage corridors after a particularly chaotic comedy show. The props team has left behind half a wooden donkey, 2 wigs, and something you sincerely hope isn't edible. As you sweep, a young actor rushes past, trailing perfume and panic. "Have you seen my fake beard?" he cries. You point to the wall where it's currently stuck. He grabs it and kisses your forehead. You wipe it off with your sleeve. In a dark corner, you find graffiti scratched into the wall. "Livia loves no one but Livia." You smirk. Romans never miss a chance to be dramatic, even anonymously. You finish the job, collect a few forgotten coins from under the benches, and wave to the doorman, who's asleep with his feet in a wine jug. You envy his priorities. Outside, the sun, is higher now. Rome is properly awake, churning with footsteps, shouting, and wheels on stone. You pause to eat your fig soft, sweet, and slightly warm from your pocket. You watch the people pass. A woman balancing a basket of eels. A merchant with a parrot that insults everyone in Greek. A legionnaire arguing with a cabbage vendor. Rome in full bloom. You start toward your next stop, the aqueduct maintenance office near the Avant. Pipe has burst, apparently flooding a bathhouse with warm, irony-scented water. You're not a plumber, but you do own a wrench made from a melted-down sword. That counts, as you walk. Someone calls your name, one of the census scribes. The goat from yesterday got into the archives again. You raise an eyebrow, still reading the tax rolls. He nods solemnly. We think he's planning a coup. You promise to swing by later. Goat removal is not technically in your job description, but neither is being everyone's quiet hero. As you approach the aqueduct station, a breeze picks up. You catch a whiff. Bread, clay, and crushed mint. Rome is noisy, messy, crowded, and always one leaky pipe away from collapse. But it's your city. Pays are the glue between its grand stones. The aqueduct in question is older than most living Romans one. Of those great arches built in the days of real ambition, when emperors wanted water to flow uphill and logic to stay politely out of the way. You arrive at the base of a slope near the Aventine Hill and immediately hear it, a thin but persistent gurgle coming from beneath a mossy stone slab. That's never a good sign. In Rome, a gurgle means a break, a leak, or a very confused eel. The aqueduct inspector is already there, looking distressed. He's young, twitchy, and wearing sandals that scream desk job. He points at the problem, like it's personally offended him. It's leaking. Again. The water's running straight into the baker's coal pile. You blink. Won't that make everything taste like damp revenge? He doesn't laugh. You kneel by the slab and tap the stone gently. The echo is hollow. There's a gap underneath. You pry the slab open and reveal a slick, ancient pipe made of lead and terracotta, snaking through the earth like a fossilized serpent. The break is a hairline split near a join. It's not dramatic, but it's determined. You pull out your sealing, kit resin, beeswax, a strip of soaked linen and begin your quiet surgery. The inspector peers over your shoulder, mumbling questions. How did you learn to do this? You shrug. I watched an old man fix a pipe once while arguing with Goat. Everything after that's been guesswork. Historians still argue whether Roman janitors were trained in basic hydraulics or just made it up as they went. Some say janitorial manuals existed, passed down like sacred scrolls. Others believe experience was the only teacher, especially when water started pouring from temple floors. Once sealed, you test the pipe by pouring a bit of water over the join. No bubbles, no leaks. You nod, proud. The inspector claps, overly enthusiastically, like you just saved the empire. You pocket, buy small coin he slips you, and tell him to keep an eye on the pressure. He nods, like that's something he knows how to do. As you pack up your tools, a child runs by, barefoot and laughing, chased by an old woman waving a broom. You sigh. Your afternoon appointment just sprinted past. You follow the chase to the edge, Cove the market square, where your next task awaits. The overflowing trash pit behind the fishmonger's stall. It's as delightful as it sounds. The stench hits you first. Not a gradual introduction. Either this is a full-on slap-you-with-and-octopus. Greeting, fish heads, squid ink, half-melted cheese, and something that might once have been cabbage. The pit is steaming in the sun, and flies hover above it like tiny chariots of doom. You tie a strip of cloth around your nose. muttering a quick prayer to Closina, the goddess of sewers. You reach for your rake and begin the delicate operation, known as not gagging while working. You scoop, bag, and shovel. Every few minutes, someone walks by and comments, "Oh, that's a strong smell," or "Better you than me." One man tries to offer advice. "Have you tried burning it?" You don't even look up. "I'll burn you in a moment." Eventually, you reach the bottom layers of spoiled lentils and a sandal. Just one. You add it to your unclaimed objects collection. You haul the waste to the nearby compost cart and wipe your hands on a towel that may or may not have belonged to a senator once. You glance at the sky. It's mid-afternoon now, sun lowering, shadows stretching. A priest passes by and blesses you. You wonder if that's because he saw the trash, or if he thinks you're dead. Your next stop is the Sabura Districtrome's rowdiest neighborhood. Narrow alleys, tall insulate buildings, too many cats. Your job here is simple. Check the communal stairwells for damage, leaks, or suspicious smells. You arrive to the sound of shouting and laughter. A man is singing from a third-story window while someone throws olives at him. You don't ask. You enter the building with the most wobbly stairs and begin your climb. Each level smells different. First floor, garlic and ambitions. Second, vinegar and regret. Third, unwashed socks and philosophical despair. You knock on a door where the floor is visibly sagging. An old woman answers, one eye narrowed, the other holding a spoon like a weapon. Floor's soft, you tell her. She snorts. "My cousin, don't fix him, do you?" You grin and get to work. You crawl under the wooden planks, tapping each with a practiced hand. You find the weak spotter, cracked beam, held together by ancient hope and 3 rusty nails. You reinforce it with a strip of hardwood and whisper, "Stay together, old friend." The floor creaks approvingly. Historians still argue how much of ancient Rome was truly maintained by the lower classes. Some believe the city teetered on constant collapse, held up only by janitors, craftsmen, and people who knew how to hammer quietly while everyone else debated law. Back outside, a boy offers you a boiled egg as thanks. You accept it like a holy relic. It's warm, slightly salty, and possibly the best thing you've eaten all day. Your final stop before sunset is the bathhouse near the Circus Maximus. It's not your favorite job. Too many soap jokes, too many slippery surprises. But as you step inside the steamy building, the heat wraps around you like a giant wet blanket. Patrons are lounging, arguing, reciting poetry badly. You nod to the attendant, who tosses you a sponge and points toward the caldarium, the hottest room. A pipe has burst. Steam is escaping like a diva with a broken fan. You slip off your outer tunic, squint through the fog, and make your way to the source. Sure enough, the copper joint has split from pressure. You press your hand to its tip, hot enough to boil a senator's ego. You wrap the pipe in wet cloth to cool it down. Then seal the split with a wax soda blend you invented after 3 failed experiments and 1 singed eyebrow. It holds For now, a man lounging nearby asks if you'll ever write a scroll about all the repairs you've done. You consider it. Too much ink, you say, and who would believe it? As you leave the bathhouse, water dripping from your sleeves, you're exhausted but satisfied. The city is holding together. Barely you start walking home, torch flickering in your hand, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. You hear the hum of Rome settling down, the quiet sweep of brooms, the bark of a distant dog, the whisper of sandals. You, Gaius, janitor of the eternal city, have survived another day. You reach your insula just as the last rim of sunlight dips behind the rooftops, leaving the streets cloaked in a soft amber gloom. A potter is closing up her stall, brushing clay from her apron. Somewhere, a lyre player strums a slow tune, half love song, half lullaby, and all slightly out of tune. You pause at your door, listening. For a brief, ridiculous moment, you imagine, by someone writing an epic about you, the adventures of Gaius the janitor. But then you hear a cat knock over a crate of onions upstairs, and reality returns with a crunchy thud. Inside your modest room bare, but yours you hang your tools on, pegs, each in its precise place. Pew knees sigh as you sit on the low stool. You rub your calloused hands. There's grit under your nails, a bruise on your shin from the bathhouse bench, and your tunic smells like 4 different gods had an argument in it. You couldn't be prouder, but the night isn't over. Not yet. Tonight. You've agreed to help clean up after a private dinner party thrown by a middling senator who insists he's descended from Aeneas, though he once confused Jupiter with Bacchus during a toast. You trudge across the street to his domus, a modestly grand home with aspirations above its marble. The doorman waves you in highs, already glassy-eyed from leftover wine. Inside, the dining room looks like a reenactment of the Trojan War. Grapes on the floor, oil stains on the couch cushions, and one sandal embedded in a decorative mosaic. You don't ask. You start with the floor, using a curved broom made of bundled reeds. The sauce stains are impressive, both in size and artistic expression. You're halfway through when you find a fish eyeball staring up at you. Same, you whisper. The host, slightly tipsy, wanders in and claps you on the back. Ah, Gaius, you're the best, the very best. You glance at the pile of fruit peels and spilled honey on the table. Clearly, he laughs and stumbles away to sleep off his epic dinner tale. You spot a broken amphora under the bench. Carefully, you gather the shards and stack them by the doorway. There's a debate among scholars. Were janitors responsible for pottery repair, or was that a separate job? You've always done both. Fewer arguments that way. In a far corner, a drunken poet is snoring softly into a fig tart. You leave him there. It's not your department. As you work, your mind wanders. You think about all the places your hands have touched. Today temples, trash pits, bath pipes, sacred fires, public latrines. You, Gaius, have patched the soul of the city in small, invisible ways. No one writes your name in scrolls, but without you, the scrolls would be buried under moldy garum and pigeon droppings. Once everything's reasonably clean, or at least symmetrically, you collect your satchel, nod to the sleeping poet, and head back out into the cool night. The streets are quieter now. Lamps flicker in the windows, casting golden halos on the walls. You pass the forum, where the marble still holds a whisper of sunlight, and the air smells faintly of time and tired politics. You spot another Janitor, younger, one scrubbing graffiti off a pillar. He waves. You wave back. Unspoken solidarity. Back home, you light a small oil lamp, pour water into your foot basin, and soak your tired feet. Bliss. Then you take out your finds from the day. A coin shaped like a fish, a sliver of painted tile, a button shaped like a lion's head. You place them in a wooden box beside your bed a-growing. Museum of the unnoticed dot. You eat a small dinner of barley, porridge, and cheese. As you chew, you wonder about the next day. Will the sewer frogs return? Will someone finally fix the palace chimney? Will you ever figure out what that smell near the bakery is? You don't know. You don't need to. Rome is chaos, but it's a pattern you understand as you crawl into your straw-stuffed mattress. A breeze flutters the curtain. Distantly, a dog barks. A baby cries. Someone plays a flute too late and too badly. You close your eyes. Tomorrow will come, and with it, ash and soap and broken tiles and leaky joy. Banned, and you'll be their guess, the janitor. Quiet, reliable, slightly smelly. Historians still argue whether men like you were ever truly appreciated. But tonight, under the soft rumble of Roman life, you don't care. You rest knowing the city stands because you never sit still for long. You wake to the clatter of wooden wheels outside and the distinct, mournful bray of a mule that has clearly lost its will to be helpful. The dawn light creeps in through the shutter slats, painting streaks across the stone wall. You stretch, wincing at the familiar creaks in your back. Today's list is already forming in your mind like a slow drumbeat. Water tank check, temple, sweep inspection of the new public urinals near the forum, your personal favorite. You slip on your work tunic, still damp from where you tried to air it yesterday, and eat a half-stilled biscuit with a chunk of fig. It tastes like regret, but does the job. On your way out, you pause by the shrine to the Lares, the household gods, and leave a sliver, a dried apricot as an offering. You whisper, "No collapsed roofs today, please," and head into the street. Your first stop is the cistern atop the Cillian Hill. It's not glamorous, but it's essential. Water control is half the job in Rome, between aqueducts, public fountains, and overzealous bathers. The whole city depends on careful balance. The cistern is housed in a squat domed building, with iron clamps reinforcing the age-worn stone. Enter with your oil lamp and descend into the cool, echoing dark. You've always liked this place. It's quiet, smells faintly of algae and old bronze. Today, you're checking for sediment buildup at the base and ensuring the outlet channel isn't clogged with leaves. Frogs, or the occasional sandal. Yes, it happens more than it should. Kneeling by the runoff grate, you spot something shiny wedged between two stones. You reach in, expecting a coin, and pull out a tiny bronze earring. Someone got too enthusiastic at the fountain again. You pocket it. Lost stand has become a growing department in your life. You scrape a layer of silt from the intake, valve, and feel a satisfying rush as water flows more freely. You imagine it journeying downhill through pipes and gutters, into homes and baths, into amphorae and mouths. Your quiet little fix ripples through Rome without anyone noticing. That's the good part. Historians still debate how much janitorial responsibility overlapped with water engineering in Rome. Some scrolls mention a position called curator aquarum, though it's unclear whether janitors like you ever officially fell under that umbrella. You suspect it depended on the day, the leak, and the size of the bribe. Back above ground, a palace servant rushes toward you, red-faced and panting. "The pigeons," he gasps. "They've returned." You blink. "Pigeons." He nods vigorously to the ceiling. Again, you've dealt with this before. A colony of extremely defiant pigeons has taken a liking to the rafters of one of the smaller public buildings, probably because they enjoy the acoustics. They coo like philosophers and drop like vandals. It's become a diplomatic crisis between architecture and hygiene. Dot at the building, you climb the narrow maintenance ladder into the rafters. Sure enough, there they are. 6 fat pigeons, nestled like smug senators on beams. One flaps lazily, as if to say, "Oh, you again." You try gentle shooing. Nothing. You wave your rag. They blink. You mutter darkly in Latin and fetch your secret weapon, a painted clay owl. Not exactly military grade, but it does spook them, especially when you rattle it. Eventually, they flutter out the window with the insulted dignity of guests asked to leave early. You sigh and sweep up the mess. You're not just a janitor. You think you're a negotiator, pest control expert, an amateur falconer. Dot. On the way out, you're stopped by a woman clutching a broken bucket. "You fix things?" "Yes," she asks. You nod. "Objects, not husbands." She chuckles, and you repair the iron band on her bucket with your portable clamp. She offers a warm roll in return. Mew it slowly as you walk to your next task. This time, it's the new public urinals marble niches installed beside the forum. Beautiful, innovative, utterly misused. Someone has drawn an anatomically questionable Minerva on one wall, and there's already a drainage issue. You roll up your sleeves. The urinal design is simple. Sloped stone, narrow drain, communal water rinse. Elegant until someone decides it's also a good spot to dump wine or a goat bladder. You clear the blockage half a fig to plum pits, by and something unmentionable, and scrub the surface with vinegar and a stiff brush. You step back, satisfied only to notice a poet nearby scribbling. "Writing about me?" you ask. He shakes his head. "Writing because of you." Odd. You move on. Later. you're called to the Temple of Mercury, not because anything's broken yet, but because the High Priest wants a janitor's eye before the upcoming feast. That's code for, tell me if anyone will slip and sue the gods. You walk the perimeter. The marble is polished to a blinding sheen. You find 2 cracked flagstones and mark them with charcoal. The priest nods solemnly and says something about divine maintenance. You pretend to write it down. Historians still argue whether janitors in Rome worked inside temples, or whether sacred spaces were cleaned only by special attendants. You've long suspected there was overlap. After all, even divine floors gather mortal dirt. The sun is high now, casting long beams through arches. You head to your midday stop, a bakery's back alley, where an old clay drain is backing up. It's a mess of flour, grease, and discarded crusts. You crouch, probe the drain with a hooked stick, and retrieve a wad of congealed dough wrapped around a coarser child's toy chariot. You hold it up. The baker's son gasps. I thought by it went to Elysium. Close, you mutter. It went to the drain. You rinse your hands in a nearby basin and accept a sweetened flatbread for your trouble. Crumbs tumble down your tunic, joining the day's collection of mystery bits. As the afternoon leans toward evening, you pause at the edge of the Palatine Hill. From here, the city stretches like a stone. Sea arches, domes, temples, bathhouses, chaos. You take a long breath. The air smells of garlic, ash, and eternity. You, Gaius, the janitor, have patched its cracks, cleared its muck, scared its pigeons, and rescued its drains. Again dot, and there are still hours to go. You descend from the Palatine, just as shadows begin stretching long and blue across the cobbles, creeping like lazy cats toward alley corners. The day's clamor softens. Vendors are packing away their olives and lentils. Philosophers are arguing slightly more quietly, and the air turns heavy with the smell of roasting onions and old bread. You tug your belt a little tighter and angle your steps toward one final task, the vomitorium at the theater now. Let's get this out of the way because you chuckle every time someone gets it wrong. The vomitorium isn't a place where Romans actually went to throw up between courses. That's one of those sexy myths that sticks like melted cheese. In truth, it's just the grand passageway that allows crowds to exit a stadium or amphitheater. But after a long play, the litter is just as intense as if there had been public purging. Wine cups, date pits, papyrus scraps, and once, memorably, a single sandal full of lentils. You arrive just as the crowd exits, murmuring about some actor who forgot his lines and claimed he was possessed by Bacchus. Classic. You let the flow pass, nodding to the torchbearers as they move in to light the sconces along the passage walls. You pull out your tools and begin your routine. The floor is slick with spilled drinks and trampled pastry. You start with your reed, broom, sweeping detritus into tidy little piles. The air hums with the aftersounds of performance laughter, shuffling feet, The occasional awkward silence where a punchline landed too hard. As you work, you spot something odd wedged between two paving stones. You kneel and pry it loose. It's a miniature mask made of painted clay, no bigger than a plum, with a smiling mouth and furrowed brows. A child's toy, an offering. You turn it over, pondering. Historians still argue whether such masks were merely souvenirs or had deeper ritual meaning. Some say they were placed in corners of theaters to trap bad spirits with laughter. You pocket it anyway. One more oddity for the growing collection. Beside your cot, you finish sweeping the exit tunnel and check the drainage last time. There was a minor flood when someone jammed a playbill down the grating. This time, it's only a cork and a beetle. You free both. The beetle looks offended. You apologize, but you emerge into the night air and take a moment to stretch your back. The moon has risen a pale disk, hovering just above the rooftops. Lanterns flicker all around, casting honey-colored light over the sleeping bones of Rome. You begin your walk home, though it's not a straight line. It never is. You're stopped on the way by a frantic baker's assistant. Gaius, the shop. There's bow, a smell. You blink. Isn't there always? No, a new smell. That's never a good sign. You follow him back through winding alleys to a linked bakery tucked between two crumbling walls. The scent hits you immediately, something between burnt figs and disappointed onions. You cover your nose and duck inside. Turns out, one of the clay ovens has cracked and allowed water to seep into the base, soaking the firewood and ruining the airflow. The result is an unholy smell and dough that rises like a sad balloon. You squat beside the oven, examine the crack, and stuff it with quick-packed clay and straw as a temporary fix. The assistant watches you, eyes wide. How do you know all this? You shrug. Experience. And noses never lie. You accept half a honeyed roll for your trouble and advise him to tell his master. It's either a new oven or customers start developing a taste for soggy crusts. Back in the street, you hear a familiar sound-a-loose cartwheel wobbling like a drunk snail down a hill. You sigh. Another merchant who refused to get his axles serviced. You jog to catch it, stop it with a well-placed bucket, and scold it with a look. The cart owner arrives, breathless and thankful. "Do I owe you?" he asks. You shake your head. "Just. Maybe fix your wheel before Saturnalia." He laughs and trudges off, tugging the cart behind him like a stubborn goat. You pass the bathhouse again, its steam clouds curling into the air like incense offerings to the moon. You consider going in, not for work, just to soak, but you know you're locked in. Minutes in and someone would yell, "Janitor." So you keep walking. At the edge of the market square, you spot a group of children playing nuts and bones under a torch. You stop and watch for a while, their laughter ringing sharp and bright against the night. One of them runs up and offers you a carved stick. "For luck," she says solemnly. You bow. "I'll keep it with the rest." And so, with pockets slightly fuller, limbs slightly wearier, and heart slightly lighter, you arrive once again at your room. You strip off your tunic, now bearing a constellation of unknown stains, and wipe your face with a damp cloth. On your windowsill, the wind gently rattles a collection of oddities: a chipped tile, the Beatles' cork, a tiny clay theater mask, and now a lucky stick. Your shelf of unspoken stories. Historians still debate whether janitors like you truly knew the pulse of the city, but standing there, looking out over the humming quiet, you think they probably did. The sky is a velvet dome now, stitched with stars. The temple bells chime in the distant soft, slow, and somehow forgiving. Pews stretch once more, and feel the day slide off your shoulders like dust from a rug. Tomorrow will bring new tasks: roofs to patch, drains to tame, festivals to sweep after. But tonight the world is still, and for a fleeting moment, Rome is clean. The next morning begins before the sun rises, because of course it does. You're not even properly awake when there's a knock, more like a series of panicked thuds at your door. You grumble, roll off your cot, and crack open the door to find one of the forum attendants practically vibrating with urgency. Gaius, it's the latrines. Again. You close the door, exhale slowly, then reopen it and nod. No point resisting fate. The latrines and you have a long-standing relationship. They betray you regularly, and yet you always return. It's complicated. You dress quickly and grab your kit: the hooked stick, the vinegar bucket, a length of twine, and an iron scraper. Dawn is only just warming the horizon as you head toward the communal latrines near the Basilica Julia. Their surprisingly beautiful arched ceilings, mosaic floors, even a faint scent of rosemary in better weather. When things go wrong in a public toilet designed for 20, they go spectacularly wrong. You arrive to a truly majestic flood, a shallow pool spreading ominously across the tile. The source, a backed-up pipe under the marble bench. You drop pure kit with a sigh that could power a windmill. As you kneel to get to work, a senator strolls by, carefully stepping over the mess. "Bless you, janitor," he says, as if addressing a minor deity. You nod without looking up, and may your toga stay dry. You remove the bench panel, wrangle the hooked stick into the dark channel, and feel resistance. Something's lodged, poo in there. With a few hard tugs, it gives. You pull out a scroll. It's soggy, but the writing's still visible. A love poem, you chuckle. Well, that didn't end well for either party. This is your morning now, restoring sanitation, dignity, and possibly the lost works of an aspiring romantic. Historians still argue whether latrines were the social hubs of Roman public life or just necessary evils. You suspect they were both. You've overheard everything from gossip to politics while scrubbing the marble here. As the mess recedes and the floor returns to its dry, glistening state, you move on to the theater's peristyle. Someone reported a suspicious crack in one of the columns. You walk the inner courtyard, brush against flowering laurel shrubs, and spot the damage halfway around. It's not structural, just a minor split where rain seeped in and froze overnight. You smear it with mortar and reinforce it with rope until a stoneworker can do the real repair. A flock of students trails past you, following their philosopher like ducklings. The teacher, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, is describing the Stoics' view on hardship. Suffering, he says, is endurance without complaint. You glance up from your mortar and mutter, "Must be janitors, then." One of the students hears and giggles. The philosopher glares. Later in the afternoon, you respond to a summons at a bathhouse, not for a mess, but for an invention. A young man with wild hair and soot-smudged cheeks beckons you toward the furnace room. "I've devised a better heat control for the hypocaust," he says proudly. He gestures at an arrangement of flues, bricks, and vented tiles. But it keeps jamming. Could you look? You crouch beside the design, examine the mechanism, and spot the flaw. A piece of clay conduit too narrow for the steam volume. You widen it slightly with your scraper and instruct him to realign the draft valves. The furnace belches, then settles into a warm, contented rumble. "By the gods, you fixed it," he whispers. You nod. All heat flows where it's allowed. He doesn't know if that's metaphor or plumbing wisdom. Neither do you, really. Historians still debate how much janitors participated in Roman engineering. But you've noticed something. The more quietly you work, the more you become indispensable. You're the one people seek when things go wrong, not the poet, not the consul, not even the priest. Evening finds you again near the Tiber, where a collapsed sewer grate is threatening to swallow a fruit vendor whole. The grate has rusted loose. Banned. Your job is to remove it, reshape the iron bands, and reset it before someone's sandal disappears forever. As you work, the vendor offers you a bruised pear. "Not fresh, but sweet," she says. You take it and thank her. It is sweet. You're surprised. When the grate is steady, she nods approvingly and points at your patched-up tunic. "You're like Rome itself," she says. "Worn, patched, still standing." You laugh. "I'll take that as a compliment." Your final stop for the day is the Janus archway. Someone's chiseled graffiti into its base, something crude about a senator and his dinner habits. You file down the worst of it and blend the marks with a bit of river-washed dust. Not erasure, but a softening of memory. The moon's back again, higher tonight, casting the city in delicate silver. You return to your room, fingers tired, clothes heavy with the scent of labor. Your little windowsill museum has a new addition, the soggy scroll, dried and curled like a forgotten leaf. You think about framing it or feeding it to the mice. Either feels fitting. You lie down, eyes heavy, chest full. The sounds of Rome drifting music, distant footsteps. Someone yelling about figs fold around you like a woolen cloak. You did good today, Gaius. Time to let it go. Now the city quiets. Even the stones seem to breathe slower. You stretch your legs beneath the blanket and listen to the far-off hush of wind over tile roofs, the tiny creak of a wood beam somewhere above your head. Gaius, the janitor of Rome, is finally at rest. The alleyways he cleaned, the pillars he shored up, the people he quietly helped whole, settled gently behind closed eyelids beneath the stars. The Tiber flows on, carrying little echoes of your day. Somewhere, someone is stepping over the threshold of a clean latrine. Somewhere else, a child is telling a friend how a janitor fixed her favorite toy. The laughter lingers, the torchlight dims dot. The wind brushes your cheek like a gentle hand. By the smells of the city-baked bread, olive oil, even the vinegar and dust fade into a softer memory. Your arms feel weightless now. The world turns without noise. Even Rome, eternal and bustling, sleeps in patches. You take one more breath, slow and deep, and feel your muscles melt. Let go of the cracked tiles and dirty sandals, the barking vendors and pigeon disasters. Let them float away like petals on the river dot. You are here, safe, still. The stars above are exactly where they were yesterday. And tomorrow, they'll be waiting for you again, but not yet. Tonight is yours. Sleep now, janitor. You've done more than enough. End of script. Sweet dreams.